Welcome into Outkick the Show, boys and girls. My name is Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having fantastic Mondays. We have much to dive into today, lots to discuss, and so let's get right to it. I want to tell you right off the top, it's gambling season, boys and girls, and that means it's time to go to sportsbookreview.com and get the best possible numbers for all preseason futures odds, everything you could possibly want in the football universe at sportsbookreview.com. Also, my guy Ryan Kelly, he just climbed a mountain. He can take care of your mountain of credit card debt. Go to thehomeloanexpert.com and they will wipe out all your credit card debt in exchange for a great brand new mortgage, which will put your financial house in order. Go to thehomeloanexpert.com. They'll get with you in a hurry. Tell them Clay Travis and Outkick sent you, and they will be glad to interact with you. We got a lot to get to. Here. Off the top, Tiger Woods is officially back. Back in a big way. If you saw the way that Brooks Koepka's girlfriend gave him a hug, that was the kind of hug where you whisper your hotel room in the midst of the hug right in the ear. I'm sure Tiger's heard that a decent amount over the years. We got Ohio State back in a mess, continuing to grow the mushroom cloud surrounding Zach Smith. Why in the world did Urban Meyer maintain his employment? Maryland under fire. The Big Ten in general, the Big Ten East is a shit show right now. No other way to put it. And I want to talk to you about the biggest needle movers in sports. And no, I'm not talking about Barry Bonds, Jose Canseco, and Lance Armstrong. I'm talking about the guys that you had to sit down and watch. But I want to start with breaking news out of Ohio State. Outside the state of Ohio, evidently, they do things like enforce domestic violence and DUI arrests. But inside the state of Ohio, if you're affiliated with the Buckeye program, it's see no evil, hear no evil. There is no evil at all if you are Zach Smith, wide receiver coach at Ohio State. This story is mind-blowingly crazy to me. News has just come out that Zach Smith, let's go through Zach Smith's employment history. 2009, he is arrested for domestic violence in Gainesville, Florida. These are just the ones that we know about. 2013, he's arrested for a DUI in Dublin, Ohio. 2015, he's arrested for domestic violence, according to the initial police report, which is later changed to say that he was not actually arrested. He was just detained. All of those things, he keeps his job. Then he violates a restraining order, gets fired the day before Urban Meyer goes and lies about everything surrounding Zach Smith. Brett McMurphy just reported, if you haven't seen it, he tracked down the judge who was involved in the 2013 DUI arrest. And this is pretty wild to think about because, again, the question has been, what did Urban Meyer know and when did he know it? And when you pull this up, this is crazy. Brett McMurphy, the judge that reduced Zach Smith's 2013 drunken driving charges, is a 1968 Ohio State graduate. Okay, I'll toss that out because there's probably a lot of Ohio State grads. This is crazy. He's a member of the Ohio State University President's Club. So I don't know how this guy didn't recuse himself from a case like this, but it definitely means that Urban Meyer would have known about a 2009 arrest for domestic violence. They would have known about a 2013 arrest for DUI, and he would have known about a 2015 investigation for domestic violence, which included photos being sent to his wife of the alleged violence against Courtney Smith. This raises an awful lot of questions. Fundamental among them, by the way, for Zach Smith is how in the world did he retain his employment? What was Ohio State thinking? What were they doing? This is a mediocre wide receivers coach. Now, some of the scarlet and gray out there will say, well, it was because he was Earl Bruce's grandson. I'm sorry. There are lots of people who get jobs due to nepotism. they don't usually get to keep them through 3 different arrests as an assistant coach. Most places in the country, if you get arrested as an assistant coach for a DUI, you get fired. You don't get the benefit of the doubt. You are fired on the spot. Most places, if you get arrested for domestic violence as an assistant coach, you are fired on the spot. We now have 2 at least domestic violence related incidents and a DUI. This is, I'm just saying, you read these tea leaves, what does he have on Urban Meyer? This dude has got something on Urban Meyer that Urban Meyer is terrified is going to go public. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's NCAA violations. Maybe it's something in Urban Meyer's private life. I don't know. I don't claim to know, but this is incredibly suspicious behavior on the part of Ohio State and Urban Meyer to maintain this guy's employment through all of these situations. It doesn't make any sense. Mediocre wide receivers coach at best. Ohio State fans were not pleased with his coaching. Urban Meyer could find 1,000 different Ohio State guys that he could have brought in to be wide receivers coach that would have done as good of a job or better. I don't believe there has ever been a program in the history of college football that I'm aware of who has retained a guy who has gotten a DUI and a domestic violence arrest. And that doesn't even count all the other stuff that may have happened that we're just now finding out. There is something going on here. He supposedly made the threat if anything ever happened to him, he would take down the program, according to Brett McMurphy's reporting. I don't know what's going on, but this thing is ugly, all right? Friday, we had a lot of other drama surrounding this story. Somebody on Facebook who's like an Ohio State shill came out and said that Texas and Tom Herman was the initial source for this story. Here's the deal. Where or why the story came out doesn't matter. I understand that's kind of a little bit of a sexy story in the background, is how in the world did this story come out? But in a larger context, it doesn't matter at all. What's being investigated now is, what did Urban Meyer know? What did Ohio State do? What kind of investigation did they conduct? What kind of information did Urban Meyer provide to his bosses? I find it hard to believe that Ohio State was okay with keeping this guy employed through a 2013 DUI, a 2009 arrest for domestic violence, and a 2015 investigation for domestic violence. It just doesn't make sense to me why in the world Ohio State would have kept him employed. If they knew all of that and they maintained his employment, that is absolutely criminal, almost, from a management perspective, to allow that to happen. I think there's a possibility Gene Smith could end up losing his job as well. This is an ugly, ugly situation. The only people who don't think it's ugly are idiot Ohio State fans who have no conception of how biased and stupid the rest of the country considers them to be. Again, I have made my living. Whether you agree or disagree with me, I have made my living on being able to objectively look at stories, review them, and say, what is the story here? Ohio State fans are embarrassing themselves. The same people who ran around ripping Penn State fans for their undying loyalty to Joe Paterno and for their truther arguments during the Jerry Sandusky mess. This is a less severe and serious investigation, but they are looking insanely dumb. If you are out there running around defending your university, then you look like an idiot. Apply the same logic that you would if this was happening at Michigan. That's what I always said. When I started doing radio, people were mad at me because I would rip Tennessee. And sometimes I would praise other schools. Look, I wish Tennessee won more. I grew up a Tennessee fan. But I guess what I uniquely have the ability to do is completely take off my fandom and look at situations objectively and analyze them. This is an incredibly ugly situation for Ohio State. And anybody who is an Ohio State fan that is not recognizing that, I seriously question your ability to rationally look at stories. I remember an Ohio State fan, when J.T. Barrett got arrested for a DUI, wrote into the Columbus Dispatch, the local newspaper there, and said, you know what? we have too many DUI stops in the city of Columbus. That's a good sign of how biased you are. If your starting quarterback gets arrested for a DUI and your first thought is maybe you shouldn't be driving around drunk, maybe that would be a good move. If your first thought is the city has too many DUI traffic stops, that's probably a sign that you have made really, really bad decisions. Okay? So I think, again, the question is this. How many games is Urban Meyer going to miss? Is he going to be suspended for 4 or 5 games, or is he going to be fired? I think it comes down to how much balls the president of Ohio State University has. Urban Meyer has done enough to be fired. I don't think there's any doubt at all. And this is a larger context. Let me talk about Maryland here for a second, too. I'm wondering, I'm getting this question a lot, and there's probably a lot of Big Ten fans who are watching this right now and wondering the same thing. How does Sandusky happen at Penn State? How does the Maryland situation happen surrounding DJ Durkin? How does Indiana end up having to fire their head coach, Tim Wilson, whatever the guy's name is? How does the Michigan State Larry Nassar story happen, and all the story that involves D'Antonio and certainly Izzo there as well? You run through the Big Ten East right now, and Rutgers has had its own series of very serious stories. I have an interesting question for you. What is going on there, Kevin Wilson in Indiana? What's going on in the Big Ten? Why have all of these stories emerged in the Big Ten in the last 6 or 7 years? Ohio State's wrestling issue. So far, Michigan has not had a major issue yet, but 6 of the other 7 have. And I wonder about that. Like, why has the SEC, which everybody thinks cheats to the high heavens, not had these issues? I wonder if it's because the SEC schools watch each other so closely that as soon as anything improper happens at those schools, it gets shared by a rival fan base. For instance, what I mean, if Ole Miss is cheating, there are people who are Mississippi State fans that are banging the drum of Ole Miss is cheating their ass off all the time, right? They're sending things to media. They're sending things on the internet. Every minute that there's a remote scandal in the SEC, Alabama's got their eyes on Auburn every minute of every day. Auburn has got their eyes on Alabama every minute of every day. I think that there is a element of severe, obsession with your rival that leads to maybe not as many bad actual things happening. Now, I don't care about players getting paid. That ship has sailed for me. I don't think you found an article from me about players getting paid or improper benefits on Outkick, and I certainly haven't spent that much time talking about it because I just don't buy into the concept of improper benefits. To me, that's just capitalism working, and so I don't care about people getting paid, right? I don't think it's a very big deal. But I do think when you talk about larger issues, these are major issues that the Big Ten East schools are dealing with. And I'm not sure, and I don't claim to know the answer, but I do think it's an interesting question to ask. Why has the Big Ten had all of these issues arise? I think, one, probably the media doesn't cover Big Ten schools as aggressively as they cover SEC schools. It's hard to hide things for a long time, I think, in the SEC because the rivalries are so intense and because the fan bases care so much. I think there's not as much passion in the Big Ten. And as a result, I don't think the media coverage is as obsessive because there's a lot of other teams that people care about. For instance, if you're in Ohio, you're an Ohio State homer, but you got the Cleveland Indians, you got the Cleveland Browns, you got the Cincinnati Bengals, you've got the Cleveland Cavaliers. There are a lot of other teams to distract, and I wonder on some level why all of these issues are arising in the Big Ten, and they aren't arising anywhere else. There's nothing comparable in the Pac-12. There's nothing comparable in the Big 12. There's nothing comparable in the ACC. There's nothing comparable in the SEC. Why is it that the Big Ten has suddenly had all of these issues arise? And, for instance, the SEC, which I think is the most competitive, it hasn't risen. Well, it's a good point. Baylor has had issues. Baylor has had issues. The Big Ten is not the new power conference. The Big Ten is a pale approximation of the SEC. A pale approximation because it's cold and hard to get tans in Big Ten country. Just think about it. I'm not claiming that there's an answer. One of my ideas is that the stories people care about so much. Baylor was big, but Baylor doesn't really have a rival. And that might tie in with my argument that nobody was really watching Baylor that close, because who is Baylor's biggest rival in the state of Texas? Everybody kind of looked down on Baylor. There wasn't like a Texas looking at Texas A&M all the time. There wasn't a Texas A&M looking at Texas all the time. So I wonder whether in some way that sunlight helps to, like that obsession, helps to keep things a little bit clean. It's worth paying attention to. All right, let's talk about Tiger. Any questions? Any questions about Ohio State? Maryland. By the way, I don't know enough about Maryland. DJ Durkin has got an ugly situation there. I read the article that ESPN put out. I tend to think that those stories follow tragedy. Does that make sense? I tend to think a story like the Maryland story follows tragedy. A guy tragically died during their off-season conditioning program. I'm not sure that at 100,000,000% means that Maryland is behaving in ways that other schools don't. Does that make sense? A lot of times I think when bad things happen, people re-engineer the situation and they go and find individuals who want to be anonymous and say, oh, this is a tragic and awful place. I'd never send my kids here, all these things. When bad things happen, it's easy to find people who will say bad things about a program. But I remember when Corey Stringer died with the Minnesota Vikings, there was just a failure to understand how severe it was. And I'm not trying to say it's not awful. It's awful anytime an athlete dies. But I think oftentimes the difference between knowing when a guy literally has nothing left in his tank and is in a dangerous health situation in the middle of a summer workout, and when a guy is just not pushing himself, it's really hard to know the difference. And I say this for high school. I say it for college, big and small college, professionals, and everything else. So much of athletics is about pushing people to their limits and beyond them. And if you are a coach and you are pushing someone to the limits and beyond, I think it's hard to know when the beyond happens. And certainly I think we can do a better job of training athletic trainers and everybody else to figure out exactly what happened. But I think that's so hard. I think that is so incredibly hard. If you played athletics growing up, I played athletics growing up, there have been times where you have probably been working out with a team and somebody has been off on the side puking and the coach has been like, you guys got to toughen up, right? Or maybe you've even worked out so hard and you've started to see stars and like you've thrown yourself back on the ground and you're like, man, I got nothing left, but you're pushing yourself as hard as you can. I just think it's so hard to figure out, and I hate when stories like these happen and then immediately everybody comes in and they say, oh, this is an awful place. I thought this a little bit, to be fair, about Michigan State. I thought that the way that ESPN covered Michigan State, as soon as the Larry Nassar case happened, ESPN parachuted in and started writing about every bad thing that had ever happened with Tom Izzo or Mark D'Antonio, and it had nothing to do with the Larry Nassar case. But ESPN tried to make that connection as if Izzo and D'Antonio were connected to the Larry Nassar case, and I didn't think that was fair. And so oftentimes when bad stories happen, I didn't think it was fair that suddenly everybody parachutes in and says bad things about the program. And to be honest, I know he got ripped for it, but when Will Muschamp stepped up and defended DJ Durkin, a guy he knows and has known really well for the past 4 years, it actually made me respect Will Muschamp more. Because I guarantee you everybody out there was like, Will, don't comment on this. Don't say anything about it. You know you're going to get asked about it. And he said the truth. As far as he knew, DJ Durkin was a good guy. His family was a good group of people. And I respect when you know somebody, even if they're facing difficulty. I have more respect for Will Muschamp because he stepped up and gave his honest opinion, even with the negativity associated with that article when he knew he was going to get ripped. And in general, by the way, let me say this. I have never been an anonymous source at any time in my entire life in an article that has run, right? There's never been a time where there has been a quote from me that was anonymous in any article that you have ever read about sports media or anything else. You may not like me, but every opinion that I have ever had that I have been willing to say in public, I put my name behind it. Now, I understand the purpose of anonymous sources when it comes to Watergate or when it comes to major national and international stories where your life could be in danger and all of those things. But in the world of sports in general, I think we use anonymous sources way too frequently, okay? And so I have never been, and I don't believe ever will be, an anonymous source. You may not like my opinion, but I will always put my name to it. I've never even thought about creating a burner account or doing anything like that. Maybe I'm too much of a narcissist. If I got an opinion or if I got words to share, you're going to hear them from me, written, spoken, or on television or wherever else it's going to be. And so I do have an issue in general with the prevalence of anonymous quotes, especially when they're anonymous quotes just ripping people, okay? I have zero appreciation for that. And so I do think that Will Muschamp was correct in the way that he broke that down. All right. I happen to look over and say, who is this guy? That guy's dead. That guy's dead. I have absolutely no interest in you at all. All right, let's go to Tiger Woods. Guys, I went back in time on my couch a decade. 2000, 1997, 2003, 2005, 2006, it was vintage Tiger Woods. Couple of stats that jumped out at me. Couple of stats that jumped out at me that I thought were unbelievable. All right. One, this was the lowest Friday, Saturday, Sunday combined score from Tiger Woods that he had ever posted in a major by 4 strokes. That's an amazing line when you consider how successful Tiger Woods has been. Secondly, how about Tiger Woods coming out and posting his lowest ever round on Sunday? Now, I know it was only a par 70, but he still posted a 64. I saw this stat, which I thought was pretty great. Tiger Woods is officially back. And all you little losers out there like, but he didn't win. That's what you sound like. But he didn't win. But he didn't win. He's back, motherfuckers. Last 2 majors combined results. The British Open and the PGA Championship. Tiger Woods minus 19, the best overall rounds in the British Open and the PGA combined. Molinari was minus 18, Adam Scott minus 16, Koepka minus 14, Kisner 14, Rose 13, Sink 12, Jordan Spieth 12. That is an unbelievable performance for Tiger Woods.